I never thought that I'd be writing a post like this, but here I am, sharing a story that's been gnawing at me for days. I don't even know where to begin, it all feels like a nightmare, but the events of the past week have been far too real. As I sit here, staring at my phone, I'm still processing everything that's happened. The events that led up to the disastrous wedding rehearsal felt like the build-up to a storm I never saw coming. What should have been a joyful occasion turned into a spectacle of lies, accusations, and public humiliation. Let me take you through the whirlwind of madness that has turned my life upside down. It all started with my sister's wedding. But before we get to that, let me introduce you to the players. My name is Hannah, I'm 28, and I've always had a relatively peaceful life. I didn't have the wealth my sister seemed to covet, but I was content with what I had. My sister, Sarah, 30, on the other hand, always had grand aspirations, even if she had to step over people to get what she wanted. Growing up, we were close, or at least, I thought we were. We shared everything, our hopes, our fears, our first boyfriends, and even our dreams of what the future would hold. But as we grew older, that closeness faded, and the rivalry took root. Sarah's obsession with wealth and status became all-consuming. While I was happy living a modest life with my husband, Jack, 29, she became fixated on finding a way to elevate her own position. Jack and I didn't come from money. He worked as a carpenter, and I worked as a teacher. But we were happy, genuinely happy. We had enough, and we didn't need anything more. Sarah, on the other hand, had to have the best of everything. Her life was one expensive dinner after another, endless shopping trips, and a constant need to impress. Even our parents couldn't keep up with her demands. Things took a turn for the worse when Sarah met David, 35, an older, wealthy real estate mogul who adored her. They were the picture of perfection, at least on the surface. But I could see through it. David was well aware of Sarah's obsession with money and status, but he indulged her anyway. As much as I disliked him, I couldn't help but envy the life they had. My own wedding to Jack was a modest affair, but Sarah made it clear she thought it was beneath her. She made snide remarks about my dress, the venue, and even our guest list. Everything we did seemed to fall short in her eyes. Still, I didn't let her attitude ruin my day. Jack and I were starting a life together, and that was all that mattered. When Sarah got engaged to David, I hoped that maybe this would be an opportunity for us to reconnect, to mend the rift that had been growing between us for years. But as the wedding day approached, it became clear that Sarah wasn't interested in reconciliation. She barely acknowledged me as the wedding day drew nearer, and the distance between us grew wider with each passing day. The day of the wedding rehearsal arrived, and I could already feel the tension in the air. Everything about the event screamed excess, the expensive venue, the lavish decor, the extravagant meal. It was a far cry from the quiet ceremony I had shared with Jack. And while I didn't mind being part of Sarah's big day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. As we arrived at the venue, I noticed how Sarah's eyes seemed to scan the room, narrowing as soon as she saw me. I had expected a warm greeting, maybe a few words of thanks for being part of her wedding, but what I got instead was a cold, calculating glare. Her fiancé, David, was by her side, his hand on her waist as they greeted guests. The rest of the wedding party was milling about, and the atmosphere was a strange mixture of excitement and tension. The rehearsal dinner was going smoothly, at least, it seemed that way. We were all seated at a long, lavish table, enjoying the food and drinks. Sarah and David sat at the head, while I was seated several places down, far enough to feel like an outsider. I couldn't help but feel like Sarah had deliberately distanced herself from me, though I had done nothing wrong. The night took a bizarre turn when Sarah's engagement ring went missing. I don't know who noticed it first, but panic set in quickly. The room fell silent, and people started looking around, whispering to each other. Sarah's face turned a shade of crimson as she began scanning the table and the floor. Guests began offering help, trying to find the missing ring, but Sarah's gaze seemed to fall on me almost immediately. "You," she hissed, her eyes narrowing in accusation. "Did you take it?" My heart sank in my chest. I was stunned. Why would I steal her ring? Why would I do anything to ruin her big day? But before I could even form a sentence, Sarah started accusing me of having always been jealous of her and claiming that I had pawned the ring to pay off some made-up debt. The room fell silent, and I could feel the eyes of the other guests boring into me, judging me without knowing anything. I tried to explain, but Sarah wasn't having it. She went on, ranting about how she had seen me eyeing her jewelry earlier, about how I had been too close to her purse. Her accusations grew wilder with every passing second. "Don't think you can hide it," she spat. "I know you're broke and desperate for money." I couldn't believe what was happening. How had this gone from a joyful family event to this? My mind was racing, trying to figure out what was happening. My husband, Jack, stood by me, equally bewildered, trying to help explain. But Sarah wasn't listening. The more we tried to defend ourselves, the angrier she became. Finally, the situation escalated when Sarah demanded that security search both me and Jack. I felt humiliated, violated, and confused. But then, something unexpected happened. David, Sarah's fiancé, stepped in. David's expression was unreadable as he stepped up to the scene. He looked around at the chaos, his face a mixture of disbelief and concern. And then, in a moment of clarity, he did something none of us expected. "I don't know what's going on here," he said, his voice calm but firm, "but this is going too far. Hannah and Jack didn't take your ring. You're making a fool of yourself." The room went silent. Sarah's eyes widened in shock, and for the first time all night, I saw a flicker of doubt in her gaze. David continued, "We're not doing this. I'm calling off the wedding." The words hit like a hammer to the chest. Before Sarah could respond, David turned to the security guard and gestured for him to stand down. The crowd murmured, still in disbelief at what was happening. I stood frozen, not sure what to make of David's sudden change of heart. But then, my eyes caught something on the floor. There, beneath one of the chairs, I saw the glint of something shiny. I bent down, and to my astonishment, it was Sarah's engagement ring. I held it up in front of the entire room. "Is this it?" I asked. Sarah looked as though she had been slapped. For a moment, she seemed genuinely surprised. But then, in an instant, she regained her composure and did something that shocked everyone. "That's it. You're trying to frame me, aren't you? You were going to plant it to make yourself look innocent," she yelled, her face twisted in rage. I couldn't believe my ears. David, however, was having none of it. He stepped forward and took control of the situation. "This is ridiculous," he said. "Hannah didn't take your ring. You've got a lot of explaining to do, Sarah. I don't want to be with someone like this." It was then that the truth came out. The CCTV footage confirmed what we had suspected all along. Sarah had planted the ring herself. David was the one who called it off. He told Sarah that he could no longer marry her after witnessing the depths of her manipulation and dishonesty. He was done. The fallout was swift and brutal. Sarah tried to salvage the situation, but it was clear that her web of lies had unraveled. David offered his support, not just for me and Jack but also in legal matters. He was disgusted by how Sarah had treated us, and he was determined to make sure she didn't get away with it. Over the following weeks, Sarah's life began to spiral. Her friends, those who had been so enamored with her wealth and status, began to distance themselves. The real truth about her came out, and soon, even her maid of honor, Melissa, was apologizing to me for her role in the scheme. Sarah tried to save face, but it was too late. The legal threats continued, but our lawyer made it clear that if Sarah didn't back down, we would countersue for defamation. She had no ground to stand on. Slowly, her wealth and support systems began to dry up. Her extravagant lifestyle crumbled as quickly as it had been built. The days after the wedding fiasco felt like a blur. Jack and I returned to our normal life, grateful for the peace and serenity that came with having each other, but Sarah's betrayal still loomed large. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over, that somehow, Sarah's web of lies would come crashing down on us again. I tried to block her out of my mind, but the truth was, she had always been the shadow hanging over my life. Her manipulations, her power plays, and her thirst for control never truly stopped. Even though she had been exposed for what she was, I knew that Sarah didn't take failure lightly. She would come back for revenge. It was a quiet evening, a week after the wedding disaster. Jack and I were sitting in our living room, the warm glow of our fireplace flickering as we sipped on wine. It felt like everything was falling back into place. Then, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and we had a strict rule about not letting in strangers. Jack went to the door, a curious look on his face. I followed him, sensing that something was off. When Jack opened the door, there stood Sarah. My heart skipped a beat. She was standing there, her once flawless appearance now slightly disheveled. Her eyes, once filled with the arrogance of someone used to always getting their way, were bloodshot and red-rimmed. She looked defeated, smaller somehow, as if the weight of her lies had finally caught up with her. I wanted to slam the door in her face and forget this ever happened, but instead, I stood frozen, unable to move. "I need to talk to you," Sarah said, her voice trembling. Jack exchanged a glance with me, clearly wary. "What's going on, Sarah?" "I've made mistakes," she said softly, her head hanging. I'm sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need to apologize. Please." It took a moment for the words to sink in. Sarah? Apologizing? The last time I had seen her, she was a woman scorned, accusing me of stealing her ring, a woman who had ruthlessly betrayed me in front of everyone. Now she was here, asking for forgiveness? It didn't make sense. "What's this really about?" I asked, my voice cold and cautious. "After everything you've done, you think you can just walk in here and apologize?" Her shoulders slumped. "I know it sounds impossible, but I've lost everything. David left me. I never thought it would happen to me. I thought I could control everything, but I was wrong. I ruined everything." There was no malice in her voice now, just desperation. Something had shifted in Sarah. But was it genuine? Or was this just another scheme? I looked at Jack, his eyes still guarded, but he nodded. "Let's hear her out." We let Sarah in, but it didn't feel right. She sat on our couch, staring at her hands as if they were foreign objects. Jack and I exchanged silent glances, both of us unsure of where this conversation would lead. "I don't expect you to believe me," Sarah began, her voice low. "But I didn't tell you the full truth before. The ring. It wasn't just about me. It wasn't about the wedding or David or anything like that." I leaned in, intrigued despite myself. "What are you talking about?" Her eyes flickered nervously. I didn't want to admit it, but the ring was never the real issue. The real reason I was so desperate was because I was being threatened. Jack and I exchanged confused looks. "Threatened?" I asked. Sarah nodded. "There was someone else, someone I was working with. Someone who knows things about my past. About the things I've done. They've been blackmailing me for months, maybe even years. That's why I acted the way I did. I was scared. Terrified. I didn't know what to make of this new revelation. It sounded like a desperate attempt to garner sympathy, but the tone in her voice, raw and vulnerable, made it hard to dismiss. I crossed my arms, waiting for her to continue. "They know everything," she whispered. "About the business deals I've been involved in. The lies I told David. The manipulation. It's all connected. And now they're threatening to expose it. I was pushed into this. I didn't know what else to do." There was a beat of silence. My heart started racing. This didn't sound like just a petty family dispute. It sounded like something much bigger, something far more dangerous. "I had no choice but to go along with it," Sarah continued. "I thought if I kept the charade going, if I stayed in control, I could get out of it. But I was wrong. The person behind this. They're more powerful than I ever realized." Jack leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Who are they? Who's behind all of this?" Sarah hesitated, as if weighing the consequences of naming the person who had been pulling her strings. But finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's my business partner, Ethan. Ethan Davis." The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Ethan Davis. I knew that name. Everyone did. He was the head of a powerful corporation, the kind of man who controlled everything from behind the scenes. The kind of man whose word could make or break entire industries. He was known for his ruthless business dealings, and I had heard whispers about his less-than-legal activities. If Sarah was involved with him, things were worse than I thought. "Ethan Davis?" I repeated. "How did you get tangled up with him?" Sarah's face twisted in regret. It wasn't supposed to go this far. At first, it was just a few business deals, nothing major. But then I got deeper and deeper, until I was working with him directly. I thought I could control the situation, but now it's spiraled out of control. He's been blackmailing me, threatening to expose everything if I don't follow his demands. Jack stood up, pacing. "So, all of this, the lies, the accusations, the ring, it was all because of Ethan? You were just trying to protect yourself?" Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I never wanted to hurt you, Hannah. I was just too scared. I was trying to keep everything together, to keep my life from falling apart." For the first time in years, I saw my sister not as the conniving, manipulative woman I had come to despise, but as someone broken, someone trapped in a web she couldn't escape. But the truth hit me hard, this wasn't just about Sarah anymore. There was someone else behind the scenes, someone with far more power than any of us could handle. And if Ethan Davis was involved, it wasn't just our family at risk, it was much, much bigger. As the days passed, Sarah's confession weighed heavily on all of us. Jack and I struggled to come to terms with what she had revealed. It was clear now that the stakes were higher than we had ever imagined. Ethan Davis wasn't just a businessman, he was a criminal mastermind who had been manipulating people for years. And now, he had his claws in Sarah. We made the difficult decision to help Sarah, even if it meant putting ourselves in danger. She wasn't alone in this anymore. The plan was simple, we needed to get out from under Ethan's control before it was too late. But it wouldn't be easy. He had eyes everywhere, and getting caught in his game was more dangerous than we could comprehend. Together, we devised a strategy to gather evidence against Ethan, to expose his illegal dealings and put an end to his reign of terror. But it wasn't just about Sarah anymore. This was about survival. It was about taking down someone who had made a career of ruining lives. But as we delved deeper into his empire, we realized that Ethan Davis wasn't just a powerful businessman, he was a man who would stop at nothing to protect his secrets. And he would kill anyone who got in his way. The war was just beginning. And as we prepared for the fight of our lives, we knew one thing for certain, if we didn't act fast, none of us would make it out alive. Months passed in a whirlwind of planning, deception, and danger. Sarah, Jack, and I worked tirelessly to gather evidence, each move calculated, every step fraught with peril. Ethan Davis never suspected that the walls were closing in on him. And when the final piece of the puzzle was put into place, we struck. The truth came to light. Ethan Davis's empire crumbled, and his dark secrets were exposed for the world to see. In the end, justice was served, but it came at a great cost. Sarah lost everything, her wealth, her reputation, and the life she had once known. But she gained something far more valuable, freedom. As for Jack and me, we walked away from it all with our love intact, knowing that we had fought for what was right. But we couldn't forget the lesson we had learned, the people you think you know, the ones you trust, can betray you in the most unimaginable ways. And sometimes, the truth is far more dangerous than the lies. The storm had passed, but its effects would ripple through our lives forever. And we would never be the same. If you enjoyed this thrilling journey, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on the latest content. Share this story with your friends, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay tuned for more suspenseful adventures.